in the sense of being over time as well. And it is not the exclusive property of any particular group. Though some civilizations or cultures explore it in more and more detail than others necessarily. Like I think in the Tibetan you get this much, much, much stronger and much more detailed. You get it clearly, much more clearly in Plotinus than you get. So Plato and Plotinus are strong. Yeah. Yes? When you raise your hand to your lips, you're called on twice. Yes?
If we look at it from the near-death experience of Kubler-Ross,
yeah, Kubler-Ross,
isn't it, at least with some who are ready for it and are philosophers, who would be near an execution, I'm thinking of Dostoevsky, they do go through a near-death experience since he's a philosopher, so it makes sense kind of. This is a few weeks after Symposium, now he has actually experienced it because now he's facing his own death. So that facing his own death would allow him to have the near-death experience. So it's first-hand from Socrates' point of view rather than earlier on.
Yeah, with the additional point that for Socrates, this has been a practice he's been engaged in for a long period of time.
I understand, but I'm seeing...
Then not saying anything against what you just said. I think you're quite right. That a good way to get much more intense about life is to realize you're going to drop dead shortly. Yeah, it helps.
In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, when the body dies, the soul is spoken of as seeing a clear light. Does that have anything to do with this stuff?
In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there are three planes they call the Chikai, the Chanyed, and the Sitpa Bardo plane. Bardo and word plane are the same. And at the moment of death, depending upon the degree to which a person has practiced meditation, they can extend that light experience or the Chikai state. And for some people who never even thought of it or have never been exposed to philosophy, according to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it lasts only the twinkling of an eye. So that's relatively short. But the Tibetan Book of the Dead is a funerary work that, as you probably know, it's read into the person at the time of their death for 49 days, especially the first 3 days intensely. And it's to awaken the departed soul to the fact that they are dead, and to try to get them to turn around, regardless of which one of these bardos they are in, to go back to this state and experience that. If so, then they either get off the wheel of life or they get a much better reincarnation. So, yes.
Does he talk about what one is to do after experiencing this and being back in the world, the other part of this cycle?
Yeah. The clearest exploration of that, if you can take what we're describing here as analogous to the allegory of the cave in the upper world, and if you take this highest experience of wisdom to be equivalent to seeing the nature of the sun in its own place in the upper world, and freed from the false beliefs about the nature of the self and reality, if you take that to be analogous, then I can suggest something. So if you accept that idea, the allegory of the cave is really the allegory of the cave and the upper world. Because once this is seen, then, according to the allegory of the cave and the upper world, he must then descend once more, only this time He voluntarily goes into that world, and he must take his place among the prisoners and play out his role of teacher. And that's the second part of the allegory of the cave in the upper world. It's a magnificent allegory. It runs for some 12 full pages. And if you're interested in that, the most interesting thing about it is his evaluation of what it is like to be here. And he says, you know, when the philosopher returns to that, he then quotes Homer. And when Odysseus was in the land of the dead, he meets Achilles, and he says to Achilles, you know, what's it like? And Achilles says, you know, I would much prefer to be the poorest slave to a landless master than be master of all the dead that lie here. Well, that's the quote that Socrates uses to describe the state of mind of the philosopher having to return into the underworld. You know, if it was, he would rather be there, but he takes this on as a duty. But he makes an interesting statement about it. He says that's a duty only if society and the state in any way contributed to his development and nurture. So it's conditional. So this is a kind of a bodhisattva image out of Buddhism. But if the only condition of the bodhisattva image here is if in some way the state helped and supplied you with some principles of your own growth and nurture, in which case it's a payback. But if not, not.
Is it possible to get there without the state somehow helping?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, my Uncle Louis. Yeah. Yeah. Only trouble with my Uncle Louis was he was also known for lying. And so we couldn't tell when he was young. So. But Burke, you know, the great work on cosmic consciousness, he came to that experience. He was reading poetry one night with some friends, and he walked away and walked down the street in a rather good state, and bammo, he got a full enlightenment experience, knocked him out. Right? So it is possible to enter into this state of wisdom without yoga, without all of this, depending upon unknown factors.
But that poem was written by somebody else, so the state had helped towards...
Oh, does the state help?
No,
Pardon me.
I'm asking, is it you said that it's your duty to return?
Yes, if the state.
Only if the state helped, and I'm saying I don't think it's possible since we all learn from other human beings.
Oh, I see what you mean. We are in a state helping one another.
Yeah, it's impossible, you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
this guy had a piece of poetry. There's something which is
Okay.
going to take you out of the cave.
Okay, then you would be saying that the society of people he came together helped create the conditions for the,
I'm
the
saying
experience, and therefore
nobody
he
can unshackle themselves.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, maybe Buddha or, you know.
Yeah, well, that's certainly worth saying, and I wouldn't deny that. Whatever set of conditions have helped produce that itself, you are tied to it, and you should in some way complement. Yeah. But for Plato, he says, if the state didn't help you, forget it. Yeah.
Some other people had some spin on it. I knew this guy once, and he worked with some Indians, and they put him up on a mountaintop for like 35 days and messed around with him with very little food and very little water. And they went up top there, and they said, did you see the bird? And the guy says, yeah, the bird went out of my head. Well, they beat him up. And they said, you never let the bird go out of your head. And he did some more work and stuff. And then he came down later, and they, he asked, why don't you let the bird go out of your head? And they said, because if you let the bird go out of your head, you've been doing this for yourself. And if you ask for something for yourself, you run the risk of Mephistopheles or something. And what they said is that you have to come back down to earth, keep the bird inside.